This morning, as a treat and as a break for myself speaking, I would like to invite Chris, Iris, and Kathy, his wife, to come up, who are going to offer us a few words. I started last week talking about stewardship. You should have received the stewardship materials in your mail this last couple of weeks. And so, Chris and Kathy, where are they? Oh, right here in the front. I'm looking in the wrong direction. Come on up here. They wrote this last month in the messenger, and they're gonna offer a few remarks about stewardship this morning to us. By the way, this is Chris and Kathy.
Good morning.
Kalimera.
My name is Chris Tyrus.
And I'm Catherine Tyrus.
And this morning we are excited to talk to you about stewardship. In fact, we've been thinking about stewardship for a lot the last few years. Now, we know what you're all thinking. You're finding it highly improbable that two working parents taking care of 3 young children and all the other events in our life that fill our schedule day in and day out, that the subject of stewardship would find its way into our private discussions for more than a few minutes, no less become something that we talk about on a regular basis.
But, believe it or not, it actually has become a frequent topic of discussion. In fact, last month, Chris felt inspired to write an article in the Messenger about stewardship. As we began to talk about what stewardship meant to us, we realized that we could better express ourselves if we shared our journey to improving our own stewardship. It started 3 years ago, when we decided to move back to Tampa Bay after leaving from Memphis for 3 years with work. Prior to moving back to the area, we were discussing what part of Tampa Bay should we move back to. I was going to be working primarily at St. Pete, and Chris was going to be working at a safety harbor. We both love the beach, so of course we considered moving to the beach. But then, we remembered what made Tampa Bay feel like home for us, and it was this community. We recalled how Father Stavros made us feel welcome years ago, and that we found a spiritual home with amazing friends and an amazing church community. Not only did we want to be near it and be a part of it, but we wanted our children to grow up in it. And for that reason alone, we decided to move back to Tampa.
So once we had settled back into Tampa and St. John's, the annual festival came around in November. We both volunteered for a few shifts while taking turns watching the kids. I remember being impressed with all the volunteers and how many people there were in the congregation that we hadn't met yet. For me, this festival was not only a wake-up call, but a challenge to become more involved. I realized just how big our community was and the work that many do for the church. I realized that just coming to church on Sundays wasn't enough. As Father Stavros has previously emphasized, it's not enough to be present, we need to be engaged. So that's when I asked myself, what more can I do? Which brings us back to stewardship. What does being a steward really mean? As we stated in the Messenger, the word stewardship, believe it or not, doesn't find its roots from the Greek word, although my dad would probably argue otherwise. Its origin is from the German words stig and wehr, which mean house and garden. Therefore, stewardship literally means guardian of the home. So when we sacrifice our time, talents, and treasure, we're acting as guardians or protectors of our house of worship, one of the most valuable and significant parts of our lives.
Personally, for our family, this church brings us together every Sunday and confirms our love for God. Our children are loved and educated while they're having fun with their peers. And when we see how comfortable they are in God's home, it brings us immense joy. This is immeasurable. I imagine it will be especially more valuable when they're teenagers and they need support. They need our church so they can lean on it, and they need their fellow Goyans. And as you know, as adults, stress becomes even greater, and we need each other, and we need Father, and we can lean on each other and ask Father to pray for us, and that's invaluable. For some of you, the value of church may be in the relationships that you or your family have made. It may have been in Theotokos, Ahepa, Young at Heart, the dance troops, YL, Daughters of Penelope, community service, or any of the over 30 ministries that we have here at St. John's. Even the most exclusive of country clubs cannot provide all of these things.
But the true value that we receive from St. John's is that it provides us with a path towards salvation. In fact, St. John's Church mission is to welcome and serve people with love, truth, joy, and peace, and to create an environment that encourages all to seek salvation through Orthodox Christianity. I would say that seems extremely valuable. And by the looks of things, I think most of you do too.
Look around. Our church is packed every weekend, even holiday weekends like Memorial Day weekend when you think people would be at the beach. Our Sunday school is overflowing with kids, and the communion line is growing longer and longer. As Father Stavros says, while some churches are getting smaller, ours is getting bigger. All of these things make it easy to say that here at St. John's, there is significant value being offered.
So now that we've proven the great value of our church, we should appreciate the importance of our stewardship and what it represents. Through our stewardship, we are expressing thanks to God and helping spread His word. We're ensuring the survival and advancement of the church, all of its buildings, and the community as a whole. Stewardship is what we do with all the gifts God gave us. It's how we repay Him for everything He's provided us. So what does this entail? The three common elements of stewardship are time, talent, and treasure, or the three T's. Hence, we are providing our personal value, our time, our talents, our treasure, to add more value to the church community. And each of these elements is as important as the next.
So let's start with the first T, time. How many of you have a lot of free time on your hands? Well, that can be answered by what's currently going on in your life. Are you currently working? Do you have a busy family life? How old are you? What are you involved in outside the church? Some of us are constantly running from one place to the next, working long hours. Others of us can spend a lot of time in church, worshiping and volunteering. And thank God for these people. What would we do without the people that made the Adida Orphan Week? The people that clean and decorate the church? The people that sing in the choir? The people that help run the ins and outs of this church? By dedicating their time, they're not only helping the church with their stewardship, they're receiving the joy of fellowship and the joy of seeing our faith and our church thrive.
The second T is talents. All of us have talents that can be shared, whether it be learned skills like an electrician or an accountant, or innate skills of organization or leadership. These talents can be utilized within all of our ministries. When submitting your stewardship form, be sure to include your special talents, which may also be able to help your fellow parishioners through the year. No talent should be wasted. Even if it's that you have a truck and physical strength, you may be able to help a fellow parishioner in need or help with work around the church grounds. And finally, the third T, treasure. What can we each contribute financially to the church? This is a very personal question. It can only be answered by each of us individually. Some of us might say, oh, but I'm a student. Or our family is just starting out. Or we have kids and college to think about. Or possibly, well, I'm retired and I live on a fixed income. All of these are reasonable. But God willing, we're all going to go through these stages. So we understand that it's a challenge. The question is, are we going to rise and meet that challenge? We could think our financial contribution as a simple obligation, a membership fee, or dues. But that's not what stewardship is, or should be. Catherine and I came to the conclusion that our stewardship is many things. Number one, it's repayment to our Lord for all things that we are blessed with. If someone came to you and said, let me give you $100, all that I ask of you is that you follow the 10 Commandments, and at the end, you give 10 back to the church, so that the church can continue its good deeds. Well, that's an easy decision, I think. You're getting 100, keeping 90, giving back 10. Well, that's what God has done for us. Everything that we have comes from above. Number two, stewardship is also sharing the joy of Christ and His Word. And by making that financial pledge, we are helping fund that work. We are making it possible to touch so many more lives, both within our church and the community outside. And number three, as we heard in today's gospel, stewardship is the pathway to salvation. Jesus says, if you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions, and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. After doing some research on today's discussion, I found that most church-going Americans give 1 to 2% of their annual income to their church yearly. Now that's quite a difference from the historical 10% tithe, and obviously far from the perfection that Jesus described in today's gospel. Now, how do we improve on what we're currently doing? The first thing we need to do is make an accurate reassessment of what we can and want to give, taking into consideration the second book of Corinthians, chapter 9, verses 6 through 8. He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Let's recognize that we all have more to give. If we all make this reassessment, I would venture to say that our church will be donating thousands more dollars next year to charities. I would venture to say that our festival would just be the cherry on top of the sundae. I would venture to say that our mortgage would be a thing of the past. So, Catherine and I have decided to pledge 50% more this year than what we did last year. And after increasing our annual pledge, we will continue to increase it yearly by a fixed percentage of our income, such that if we're giving 2% now, next year it becomes 3%, and so on. I think this is a great way to gradually increase our contributions.
Honestly, we thought we were giving enough before, but the truth is, we can do more. This is our home, and we want our home not to merely survive, but to flourish. We want this most abundant blessing to be around for our kids, and for our grandkids, and your grandkids, and our entire community, and all of Tampa. And for that reason, we as a family are committed to increasing all three parts of our stewardship. We are increasing our time, our talent, and our treasure.
We hope that our message resonates with you today. We hope over the next 2 weeks, you'll take a few moments to think about your own stewardship, discuss it with your spouse, pray over it, and come to church on December 8th with your pledge form, excited about the future of St. John's and all that our community will accomplish in his name. Thank you, and happy Easter.